In 1980, the government decided to tell us how to eat. They released the first dietary guidelines, promising that if we just ate less fat and more grains, we'd be healthier. We quickly became the fattest, sickest, and most medicated humans in all of history. Take a look at the data. Since 1980, the obesity rates have more than doubled. What this reveals isn't a coincidence. The problem lies in the guidelines themselves. They weren't created to keep us healthy. To understand why Americans are chronically sick, all we have to do is follow the money. The money trail starts with the so-called experts. Take the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, for example. They certify every registered dietitian in America. But who pays their bills? According to their own financial disclosures, their corporate sponsors include PepsiCo, General Mills, and the National Confectioners Association, the literal trade group for candy manufacturers. But it gets worse. Look at the American Diabetes Association. Their top donor tier, for those who have given over $1 million, is dominated by one specific industry: pharmaceutical companies. But this corruption isn't new. To get the full picture, we have to go back to 1967. In the 60s, heart disease was rising, and the Sugar Research Foundation was terrified that scientists were starting to blame sugar. So they hired Harvard scientists and paid them the equivalent of $50,000 to write a review. Their orders were clear: bury the link between sugar and heart disease and blame it on dietary fat instead. The result was a 1967 paper in the New England Journal of Medicine that did exactly that. It demonized saturated fat and gave sugar a free pass. This brought us 50 years of the low-fat dogma. We were told to avoid natural fats such as butter, steak, and eggs, and replace them with heart-healthy alternatives such as vegetable oils and carbohydrates. So did it work? The data says no. The government spent millions on the Women's Health Initiative, a massive trial tracking nearly 49,000 women. The result? The low-fat diet failed to prevent heart disease or cancer. But it's actually worse than that. For women that already had heart disease, the low-fat diet increased their risk of complications by 26%. That was the past, but how are they manipulating science today? It all starts with a structural flaw. The USDA has two conflicting goals: protecting public health and promoting agriculture. Yet every 5 years, a Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee is appointed by the USDA to research selected topics. Yet because of the USDA's conflict of interest, they control the dietary guidelines through three main mechanisms. First, they place biased members into the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee. A 2022 investigation found that 95%, or 19 out of 20 of the individuals on the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee had a conflict of interest with the food and/or pharmaceutical industries. These are the very researchers that are supposed to be creating a healthy diet for Americans, not selling products. Second, the individuals in the USDA use their power to silence scientists. In 2020, the scientific committee recommended lowering the added sugar limit to 6% of calories. The USDA, however, stepped in and simply said no. They kept it at the industry-friendly 10% of total calories. Crucially, they were able to go against the scientists' recommendations because the report is merely advisory. That means that at the end of the day, the politicians are the ones who publish the official guidelines. And third, they censor what the scientists can research. For 2025, the USDA knew that the science on alcohol was turning negative, so they simply removed alcohol from the researchers' questions. But why go through all this trouble? It's quite clear that it's because of this highly profitable cycle. First, the Dietary Guidelines for Americans promotes high-carb, ultra-processed foods, which lead to big food profits. Next, people get metabolic syndromes such as obesity and/or diabetes. Finally, Big Pharma steps in to sell treatments such as insulin, Ozempic, and statins. It creates lifelong customers dependent on their products. Take Abbott, for example. They sell Ensure, a highly processed sugary drink, and they sell the glucose monitors used to track the diabetes caused by their food. Like many companies nowadays, they play both sides of the cycle. The reality is unsettling. The guidelines are a compromised document created by a conflicted agency to serve an industrial ecosystem. So be skeptical and follow the incentives, and when in doubt, eat real, whole foods and listen to your own body. If you learned something useful today, feel free to share it with others you care about. Let me know in the comments what disturbs you most about the modern food industry. And if you believe in trust and transparency, join us as we uncover the truth behind the modern food industry.